Not every change in life begins with a decision. Some begin with a shadow on the windowsill, a scent you can't name, a flower blooming when it isn't supposed to. Have you ever walked past a plant, simple, unremarkable, and felt something pause inside you, as if it was holding a message you weren't quite ready to hear? That's where we begin today. This is not about decorating your space, it's about listening to it. In the quiet world of Feng Shui, certain plants are more than green. They are directional, they are symbolic, they are thresholds between seasons, between patterns, between where you are and where you're quietly trying to go. Today, I want to walk with you through 4 of them. They don't promise miracles. They won't make headlines. But their presence, when chosen and placed with care, can restore motion where things have felt stuck. They can calm a space that feels scattered. And sometimes, they can open a door that you didn't know was locked. If you've ever felt the room shift after watering a forgotten corner, if you've ever kept a plant not because it was pretty, but because it meant something, you already understand. And if this kind of reflection resonates with you, if you believe in the quiet intelligence of design, I invite you to support this space. Please like, share, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're gently walking toward 1,000 subscribers, not for numbers, but to continue nurturing conversations like this, where the subtle meets the essential. Now, let's begin. By nature, as messenger, we often mistake nature as something we simply live around, as decor, as backdrop, a peaceful image we hang on a wall or tuck in a planner. But in the world of traditional energy systems, especially in classical Feng Shui, nature is not passive, it is not accessory, it is responsive. Plants, especially those placed intentionally, do not merely fill empty corners. They translate the movement of life itself. They interpret the balance or imbalance within a space, and in many cases they serve as messengers long before we realize a message is even being sent. This is where modern living has forgotten something our ancestors knew by instinct. That greenery is not just for beauty or air quality, it is for feedback. In the Feng Shui tradition, the flow of energy, or qi, is deeply influenced by form, texture, and life force. Everything from the slope of a ceiling to the material of a bowl can shift how qi moves through a space. But few things guide that movement more subtly or more powerfully than plants. Why? Because they live. And in living, they respond. Consider a plant with soft, upward leaves in a bright, south-facing room. That plant does more than survive. It begins to lift the entire tone of the room. The light reflects differently. The air feels warmer. Conversations there often open more easily. Now imagine the same room with a heavy, slumping plant. The corners begin to feel slower. The brightness dulls. Visitors may not name it, but they feel it. The sensation of subtle heaviness. This is qi in motion, or qi stalled. Plants, in this way, are both barometers and correctors of space. They take in the quality of their environment, and through their health, shape, and posture, they send energy back out, either amplified or softened, clarified or confused. In Feng Shui, we study not just where plants are placed, but how they are shaped, how their leaves fall, how often they bloom, and whether they grow upright or sprawl. These details are not aesthetic, they are directional, energetic, alive. One of the most overlooked truths in design is that what's green is not always good, and what's beautiful is not always balanced. Take, for example, a lush indoor vine, easy to maintain, visually pleasing. But if left untrimmed, growing in every direction, it can create dispersive qi, energy that feels scattered, unfocused, difficult to contain. On the other hand, a lean, quiet stalk with clear vertical lines may foster grounding and lift. Different forms, different functions. This is why in traditional Feng Shui practice, plants are categorized not just by species, but by behavior. Some are seen as gatherers, drawing energy inward and anchoring it. Some are dispersers, sweeping stagnant energy away. Some are protectors, shielding entryways and redirecting harmful flow. Others are bridges, linking separated spaces and harmonizing disharmonious ones. None of this requires belief, only observation. You place a plant in a space and you watch what begins to shift. Is the room suddenly more inviting? Are arguments less frequent near it? Does that corner feel less oppressive when something grows there? These are not mystical ideas. They are experiential truths, felt in body, observed in mood, confirmed over time. And yet, in most modern homes, plants are chosen for color, trend, or availability. We fill a space with what we think looks good, without asking, what does this plant do here? What is it inviting or blocking? Here is a concept worth remembering. Not all plants are equal, and not all plants serve your space the same way. Some plants are ambient. They provide general vitality, but do not alter the structure of energy. Others are interactive. They signal change, support transformation, or hold boundaries where needed. And within that, there are those rare plants that serve as invitational energy, opening new channels for flow, opportunity, or protection, depending on how and when they are introduced. These are the plants worth seeking. Because when placed well, they do not merely grow. They activate, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with a shift in texture, in tone, in trajectory. This is where the concept of energetic flora enters the conversation, not a scientific term, but a useful one. Energetic flora are not determined by rarity or scientific taxonomy or beauty. They are recognized by their effect. They are plants that harmonize with human presence, not just biologically, but spatially. They are plants that, when introduced into a space, have a measurable influence on how energy, attention, and emotion move through that space. Some stabilize, some open, some protect, some sharpen. And each of them, when understood symbolically, can help us answer a deeper question. What is my space currently echoing? And what am I unknowingly reinforcing through my surroundings? Because Feng Shui is not about adding, it is about listening. And when you begin to treat your plants not as decoration, but as conversation, your home stops being a stage and begins being a compass. A place that doesn't just look good, but moves well. A place that doesn't just store your things, but supports your life. This is the promise of living intentionally with plants, not as trophies, but as translators. Not as aesthetic, but as alignment. And as we move deeper into this journey, we'll explore specific forms that have earned their place, not just in history, but in homes that value energy over appearance. If you've ever felt that a room didn't support your momentum, or that something was just off, despite having all the right pieces, consider this. The correction may not be loud, it may be green. It may already be growing in a garden you pass by. And when you bring it into your home, not for trend, but for truth, you may discover that movement, real, sustainable movement, can be rooted, literally. Shall we look closer? Let's continue. 2. Kogan grass. The quiet guardian. There are some presences that announce themselves boldly, large leaves, vibrant blooms, intoxicating fragrance. And then there are those that arrive softly, almost invisibly. But make no mistake, it is often the softest that carry the strongest stance. Kogan grass is one of those. In the rural plains of Southeast Asia, it grows wherever land is left unattended. Not manicured gardens, not polished city parks. It appears along rivers, beside broken fences, on the edges of rice paddies that haven't been touched in years. You could walk past it 1,000 times and never notice it. But in the practice of traditional Vietnamese and Laotian Feng Shui, Kogan grass is anything but invisible. It is a protector, not a shield in the sense of confrontation, but in the sense of quiet filtering. It doesn't block energy by force. It absorbs what isn't meant to enter. And in that, it performs one of the most undervalued tasks in any home. It clarifies the perimeter. Think of your home like a conversation. There is the part you speak aloud, the decor, the furniture, the design choices, but there is also the tone behind those words, the pause between sentences, the subtle cues that tell others, this is how I like to be treated. Your home sends those cues too, and the edge of your property, the gate, the entrance, the threshold, is where those cues begin. Kogan grass is often used at these thresholds, tied in small bundles and hung near entry points, dried and placed in corners near doors. even laid beneath doormats, not to be seen, but to be felt. In these positions, it doesn't scream for attention. It watches and filters. Its power lies in its resilience. This is a plant that does not die easily. It survives drought, neglect, harsh wind. It bends when necessary but does not break. In energy terms, this is incredibly important. It teaches the space around it how to hold firmness without aggression, endurance without stiffness, grounded protection without paranoia. In homes where there is constant interruption, from guests, from neighbors, from stress, Kogan grass acts as a buffer. In offices where energy enters and exits too rapidly, it creates pacing. In small apartments near noisy intersections, a bundle near the front window can subtly suggest this space is sealed. And yet, it is not heavy, not domineering. That is part of its beauty. Many people seek energetic protection through large statues, heavy furniture, dark colors. But protection is not always about walling off. Sometimes it's about gentling the edge, rewriting the tone. And that's where Kogan grass thrives. There's an old proverb in northern Vietnam that says, "The house with no line in the sand is the first to lose its fire." The line here doesn't mean separation, it means definition. In Feng Shui, we call this the perimeter qi, the subtle information that tells the environment where you begin and where it must pause. Kogan grass, when placed properly, reinforces this perimeter. It doesn't repel everything, only what isn't aligned. It doesn't make things disappear. It simply slows what shouldn't rush. I once worked with a small family in Dalat. Their home was lovely, warm wood, natural light, open spaces, but they had frequent disturbances, strange visitors, unexplained tension. The front porch felt exposed, even though nothing looked unusual. They had tried incense, hanging bells, even repainting the doorway. Nothing held. Until a grandmother in the neighborhood, barefoot, kind-eyed, and sharp as a nail, walked by one afternoon and said with a smile, "Your house is strong, but it's letting in everything." She returned the next day with a small bundle of dried Kogan grass, tied in red string, slightly burnt at the edges from the sun. She placed it above the lintel, said nothing more, and left. Weeks passed. The family reported fewer interruptions, fewer headaches, fewer strange encounters. Was it the grass? Maybe. Or maybe it was the message that something now stood watch. Either way, the house began to rest differently, and so did they. This is the power of alignment, not the power of decoration or mysticism or symbolism for the sake of performance, but the power of understanding what message your space is sending and choosing to whisper something different. Kogan grass is not for everyone. In a high-rise apartment with no clear directional entry, its effect may be minimal. In a home already sealed and protected, its addition may be redundant. But for homes that feel too open, too vulnerable, too easily disrupted by the world just outside the door, this simple plant can be a quiet ally. If you do choose to place it, remember this: less is more. Don't crowd it, don't decorate it. Let it be what it is, dried or fresh, in a small bundle. Placed near the entrance, not in the center, but to the left of the door if facing out. Let it rest there for a moon cycle. Then check the air, not with your nose, with your presence. Do you feel different when entering? Does the threshold breathe easier? Then it's working. In the world of energy, change rarely knocks. It slips in when the door's ready, and sometimes all it takes is a handful of wind-worn blades, tied with string and placed with care. That is not magic. That is alignment. Shall we explore the next? White epiphyllum, VM, the flower that waits for the right moment. Some things in life do not bloom on schedule. Not when you ask them to. Not even when you prepare meticulously for their arrival. Some things open only when the conditions are right, not in the world, but within you. The white epiphyllum is such a thing, known in Vietnamese as Quinn and elsewhere as the Queen of the Night. This flower does something astonishing. It waits in silence, hidden among thick leaves and thorn stems, until one quiet night, rare and unannounced, it opens completely. And by morning, it is gone. A bloom that lasts only hours, that arrives without warning, that demands nothing. But when it comes, its perfume is unforgettable, and its presence impossible to ignore. In Feng Shui and Eastern symbolic traditions, this flower has long been associated not just with beauty, but with timing. It does not reward effort. It rewards readiness. It does not respond to control. It responds to resonance. This makes it one of the most profound metaphors in all of plant symbolism, because its power is not in permanence, it is in presence. The white epiphyllum teaches that some blessings, wealth, clarity, even love, cannot be summoned like a delivery. They must be met like an arrival. There is a story I remember from the old quarter of Hanoi. A middle-aged woman ran a family bookstore, quiet, beloved, but always struggling. She rearranged the shop many times, changed signs, offered discounts, but nothing seemed to grow. Then one year a friend brought her a white epiphyllum in a ceramic pot. "This is a waiting flower," the friend said. "Let it remind you that not everything opens when we wish it to." She placed it near the register, watered it occasionally, mostly forgot it was there. Until one evening, months later, she returned after dinner to grab her purse and found the entire front of the shop filled with fragrance. The bloom had opened, just one, and the whole room felt different. That same night, a travel writer staying in the neighborhood passed by and saw the glow from the window. He walked in, struck up a conversation, and by the next month had published a short feature on the shop in an international magazine. Visitors came, slowly, kindly. Not a flood, but a stream. The flower bloomed twice more that year. The business never became a chain, but it no longer struggled. And more importantly, the woman stopped struggling inside herself. She realized something vital. Her timing had not been off. It had been forming. The white epiphyllum is often misunderstood. People expect it to bloom on command. They buy it hoping for a miracle moment. But if you watch it long enough, you learn something truer. It blooms when it's safe, when the air is calm, when the room doesn't need to prove anything. In Feng Shui, we call this harmonized stillness, a state where energy has landed, not in a rush, but with conviction. When placed in a space that is too loud, too chaotic, too controlling, the epiphyllum may never bloom. But in a space that listens, it flourishes on its own schedule. What does this teach us? It teaches that not all energy responds to noise, that some forms of wealth, creative, relational, spiritual, only arrive when we stop asking for them to hurry. The plant itself prefers shade, indirect light, and quiet. Its leaves are long, often thick, with a winding, almost hesitant shape. But when it prepares to open, everything straightens. The bud elongates, the temperature shifts, the air feels charged. This is not superstition, this is pattern. The bloom is white because it is unburdened by performance. It is large because it has taken time, and it is fragrant because it has gathered clarity in the dark. If you feel your life has been one of effort, but not fruition, this plant may be for you. Not as a decoration, but as a reminder. Place it in a room where you work toward long goals, writing, learning, healing. Place it in a place where you wish to receive, but without grasping. Let it teach you the rhythm of receptive fawn, and let it surprise you, not with it as flower, but with your response to its rhythm. There are days when nothing moves, and you think you have failed. Then, one quiet hour, something opens, and it is not the world, it is you. That is the epiphyllum's gift. And that is why, in Feng Shui, it is never recommended for impatient homes, but always welcome in homes that are learning how to wait without despair. If you already own one, consider where it lives. Is it under stress? Too much sun? Too much traffic? Move it gently. Not to where it will be seen, but where it will feel safe. And then let it do what it was born to do. Bloom when it is ready. And remind you that your time will come too. Not when you force it, but when you've become the kind of person who doesn't need to force anything at all. Shall we keep going? Or lemongrass flower, the sharpness that softens. There is a scent that, once you've known it, never quite leaves you. It arrives not with sweetness, but with clarity. A citrus thread braided through heat and wind and spice. That is the voice of lemongrass. And when it flowers, which is rare, it does so not to charm, but to signal readiness. In Feng Shui, lemongrass carries a special function. It cuts through confusion, It wakes up stagnant corners. But it doesn't do this with aggression. It does it by remembering. Let me explain. Of all the plants in Southeast Asian kitchens, lemongrass is the one that lives on the threshold between medicine and memory. You boil it for colds. You crush it for tea. You wrap it around fish. You dry it for potpourri. But long before it ever reached Western cuisine, lemongrass was burned in small clay bowls at the foot of thresholds, not to feed but to clear. In energetic language, lemongrass says, there is something here that no longer belongs. But it does not judge, it simply dissolves. The lemongrass flower specifically is delicate, pale purple, leaning toward cream. It emerges after the plant has matured for a long time, often ignored. Unlike flashy blooms, it sits at the top of long, blade-like stalks. If you don't look for it, you'll miss it, but its energetic signature is unmistakable. The moment it opens, the area around it seems cleaner, more alert, more truthful. This is what makes it so important in spaces that carry emotional residue. Homes where arguments have lingered. Rooms where past relationships once lived. Corners where we've stored things we don't want to look at. Lemongrass doesn't fix those stories. It doesn't erase them. But it brings air. It brings movement. And in Feng Shui, movement is the first step toward repair. I remember a client in Ho Chi Minh City, an herbalist, ironically, who kept her kitchen immaculate, her shelves alphabetized, but her bedroom, stale, quiet, tired. Not depressed, but slow. She didn't understand. She had crystals, incense, a proper compass-based orientation, but the room felt like it was holding its breath. We visited during the dry season, nothing blooming. Still, I noticed something in her kitchen window, a pot of lemongrass, tall, neglected, yet somehow resilient. I asked her gently to move it to her bedroom, not inside, but on the balcony just outside the window. No flowers, she said. That's fine, I said. Just let it stand watch. 2 weeks later, she called. The flower had opened. First time in years. She didn't say anything more, but I could hear the difference in her voice. Clarity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it blooms once and disappears. But the effect remains. This is the role lemongrass flower plays in energy cultivation. It isn't ornamental. It's surgical. It doesn't beautify. It reveals. It doesn't attract. It extracts. That's why it should never be placed in a home simply for appearance. When you introduce lemongrass, especially its bloom, you are inviting truth. And truth, while liberating, is not always comfortable. Place lemongrass near entrances that feel murky, near bathrooms where resentment accumulates, on balconies that face noisy intersections or harsh sunlight. Let it transmute, not by force but by presence. If the flower appears, take note. Don't pick it. Don't display it. Let it complete its short life on its own terms. Its language is not for others. It's for the house, for the spirit of the space, for the unseen walls that hold our unspoken grief. In traditional Vietnamese Feng Shui, there is a saying, Ko sa no, kung vi deb, ma vi can. Lemongrass blooms not for beauty, but because it's time. And when it does, it reminds us, what's heavy must move. What's stagnant must speak. What's been ignored must breathe. Do not use this plant casually. It is not peppermint, not basil. It does not seduce. It stirs. But if you're in a space where clarity is missing, where you're tired but not sure why, stuck but not sure how, awake but not sure what for, then lemongrass flower may be the quiet bell you've been needing, not to ring answers, but to make space for them. So should you keep a pot of it in your home? Only if you're ready for your home to become more honest. Only if you're willing to listen. Only if you understand that some plants, like some truths, don't bloom because we command them. They bloom because we've finally let go of the noise. That's when clarity slips in, not with thunder, but with a thin purple bloom leaning into morning light. Shall we continue? 5. Bamboo flower, the bloom of endings and transitions. Most people know bamboo. They recognize its tall, slender shoots, its rhythmic pattern of green and hollow joints, its strength, its flexibility. They see it as a symbol of perseverance, growth, even luck. But almost no one talks about its flower. Because the bamboo flower is a paradox. It appears once in a lifetime, sometimes every 60, 80, or even 100 years. And when it blooms, the bamboo doesn't flourish. It dies, not in sadness, but in fulfillment. In traditional Feng Shui, the bamboo plant is considered one of the most revered living elements. Not because it grows quickly, but because it grows with rhythm, straight, centered, humble. But when it comes to the bamboo flower, the reverence deepens. The flowering of bamboo is not a beginning, it's a completion. It marks the end of a cycle so complete, so enduring, that the plant's only response is surrender. It releases its seeds and then lets go. Why does this matter? Because in Feng Shui, in symbolic observation, the bamboo flower is not about death. It's about right timing for transition. It tells us something essential, that sometimes the greatest act of power is not expansion, but release. There's a story passed down among temple caretakers in the hills near Kyoto. One old monk who had planted bamboo decades earlier was asked by a younger apprentice, "Why do you sit so long watching a plant that never flowers?" The old man smiled and said, "Because when it does, I'll know the next part of my life is ready." He waited and waited. In his 80th year, one single stalk in the far back corner of the temple garden bloomed. He did not mourn. He shaved his head anew, placed his broom against the wall, and handed his keys to the junior monk. He left the monastery 3 days later, peacefully, wordlessly, and walked back to the village he'd not seen since he was a child. It wasn't the bloom that changed him. It was the readiness it revealed. The bamboo flower, when it comes, is not loud. It's not stunning like a peony, not fragrant like jasmine. Its power lies in its timing. It says, what has been rooted has now fulfilled its pattern. Now it is time for something else to rise. In your home, you may never see a bamboo flower, but in your life, you will feel its equivalent. That moment when you have been doing the same thing for years, managing a career, maintaining a relationship, living in a house, and suddenly something tells you, this is done. Not broken, not bad, just done. That's bamboo flowering. And when you resist it, you suffer. When you allow it, you transform. From a Feng Shui perspective, bamboo as a plant supports alignment with purpose. It brings uprightness to a space. But when it begins to flower, or when symbolic representations of flowering bamboo appear in art, fabric, or dream work, it's a cue, a nudge from the invisible to say, your current chapter has matured. A new one wants to begin. Don't rush to change everything. Just start listening. Do you feel more tired lately, not from lack of sleep, but from something unnamed? Are you less interested in defending routines that used to define you? Are you drawn to silence? Not out of fatigue, but curiosity. These are signs, not always dramatic, but always directional. In Feng Shui adjustments, when someone is undergoing a deep life shift, a move, a divorce, a retirement, an inner transformation, we don't just suggest grounding symbols, we also encourage them to mark the threshold. That's what the bamboo flower represents, the quiet permission to step through. In practice, you might bring a bamboo plant into your home not to anticipate its bloom, but to remind you of its promise, to be strong and bend, to grow straight and remain hollow enough for new energy to pass through. And if one day it begins to flower, not in your pot but in your heart, you will not panic. You will recognize the message. Something has fulfilled its pattern. It does not need to be clung to. It needs to be honored, thanked, and gently released. This is not superstition, this is inner architecture. And the bamboo flower, rare as it is, lives quietly in all of us. The moment we stop trying to prolong the familiar and begin to listen for what is asking to be born. Let it come, not with urgency, but with reverence. 6. Rooting fortune, not chasing it. In a world that constantly urges us to hustle, pursue, and grab hold of success with both hands, Feng Shui offers a quiet resistance. It suggests, what if abundance isn't something you chase, but something you learn how to receive? What if fortune, rather than sprinting ahead of us, is actually waiting for a signal that the space it's meant to enter is finally prepared to hold it? This is the crux of rooting fortune, a term not often discussed, but deeply embedded in the practice of traditional environmental alignment. Rooting implies depth. It implies patience. It implies trust in time and trust in terrain. And that's where plants become more than decor. Across this entire exploration, whether we've looked at the quiet wakefulness of Kogan grass, the ethereal timing of white epiphyllum, the cutting clarity of lemongrass flower, or the sacred surrender of the bamboo bloom, what connects them is not aesthetic, it's rhythm, it's place. They do not chase sunlight, they grow toward it. They don't demand attention, they offer presence. And in Feng Shui, this is the essential posture of welcoming prosperity, not the reaching hand, but the steady ground. It's worth remembering that in Chinese metaphysics, wealth is never defined by possession. It's defined by flow. In fact, one of the most common characters for fortune, fu, contains components that represent blessings arriving at the home, a space that is receptive, not reactive. That openness, that capacity to receive must be cultivated, not declared. Which brings us back to plants. Why have they always been at the center of spaces that feel balanced, fertile, alive? Because they are living symbols of one truth: the external mirrors the internal. When a space holds a plant that is thriving, rooted, and attentive, it is not just green. It is inherent. It is signaling to unseen energy. This space has nourishment. This space has circulation. This space has breath. Now ask yourself, can the same be said of your finances, your opportunities, your dreams? In many homes that feel energetically stagnant, it is not the amount of stuff that causes the blockage. It's the quality of presence. A house can be full of luxurious materials, expensive furniture, and rare art, and still feel lifeless. Why? Because the environment has no active dialogue with its inhabitants. But introduce one single well-placed plant, chosen with care, tended with intention, and suddenly the room remembers how to breathe. And that breath is an invitation. There's an old Vietnamese phrase, "Lo Kong Vao Nha Chat," which loosely translates to, blessing does not enter a crowded house. Not crowded in volume, but crowded in spirit. A space that clings too tightly, that fears letting go, that hoards, whether that be objects, emotions, or habits, is a space that repels flow. Plants, especially the ones we've discussed, are not solutions. They are companions. They are reminders that if you want fortune to grow, you must first grow the soil it needs. And what is that soil? It's not money, it's not credentials, it's not luck. It's space, it's rhythm, it's the subtle shift from control to collaboration. This concept of rooting is also mirrored in the Buddhist worldview, particularly in the idea of right livelihood and right intention. A tree does not fruit by wishing, it fruits by rooting, by drawing up nourishment, by aligning with sun and season. And when it is ready, not before, it bears what it was meant to. So does a human life, and so does a home. I once visited the home of a ceramic artist in Hoi An. Her work was flawless, elegant bowls with quiet curves and glazes that seemed to hum. But her studio, she confessed, felt blocked. "It's like the ideas stall in my chest," she said, "like they don't move." I walked with her around her space. Beautiful light, clean lines, high ceilings. And then, in a corner, tucked behind a stack of unused molds, I saw it. A single potted bamboo, browning at the edges, dry soil, forgotten. "Why this plant?" I asked. She shrugged. "My mother gave it to me. She said it would bring focus, but I guess it didn't work." I didn't say much. I only asked her to move it, place it where she would see it every day. Water it regularly, trim its yellow leaves, sit near it once in a while and simply observe. 3 weeks later, she called. Not only had her kiln been working better, but she was dreaming again. New patterns, new shapes. She didn't credit the plant. She didn't credit herself. She just said, "The space feels more honest." And in honesty, fortune flows. This is not metaphysics. This is the physics of presence. A rooted plant is not proof of prosperity, but it is evidence of readiness. And that readiness, quiet, unforced, grounded, is what Feng Shui calls steady qi. It is the kind of energy that doesn't flash or spike. It builds, it holds, it stabilizes. It is what allows a person to not just receive a windfall, but to sustain it. And that is the true measure of fortune. Not what you attract, but what you are strong enough to keep. Let's return to the plants then, not to see them as tricks or tokens, but as teachers. Kogan grass reminds you that consistency is more magnetic than charisma. White epiphyllum teaches that timing matters, and beauty is not always public. Lemongrass flower cuts through residue, inviting renewal through discernment. And bamboo bloom, it whispers, release is not an end, but a doorway. Together, these are not just flora, they are architecture. They design the way you relate to abundance, not with desperation, but with dignity. Because chasing fortune assumes it is elsewhere. Rooting fortune acknowledges it's already circling, waiting for the right conditions. And maybe, just maybe, that condition is you, in your home, with your care, your placement, your presence. Not rushing, just rooting. And when fortune arrives, it won't knock loudly. It will land softly, like a seed in prepared soil. Final pause with me now. Not to summarize, but to breathe. We've walked together through a quiet garden of meaning, past the blade-like grace of Kogan grass, the rare hush of white epiphyllum, the clearing presence of lemongrass flower, and the reverent surrender of bamboo bloom. Each plant was not simply a suggestion for decor, but a message, softly rooted in the old language of energy and timing. And through them, one truth unfolded. Fortune is not something we demand. It is something we prepare for. We often ask, how can I attract more abundance? But the deeper question, the one these plants ask back, is gentler. Can you hold what's already on its way? There is no ritual more powerful than awareness, no object more sacred than your attention, and no fortune more lasting than that which grows from clarity. So as you return to your day, I don't ask you to rush out and buy anything. Instead, I invite you to notice what already lives in your home. What corners have gone quiet? What spaces are asking for breath? Where might you let something take root? Not to change your life overnight, but to help you remember your own rhythm. Because energy, like soil, responds best to care. And when you care for even one corner, a windowsill, a threshold, a forgotten ledge, you are not decorating. You are declaring, this space is ready. Let that readiness echo quietly through your home. Let it move with you, not loudly but fully. And if this reflection offered you something to think about, something to feel into, something to remember, I gently invite you to leave a comment below. Share what lives near your doorway or in your windowsill, or what plant you've always been drawn to and never quite knew why. I read these stories. I learned from them. We all do. And if you'd like to keep walking with me in this way, through this gentle language of place and possibility, I'd be honored. Please consider liking, sharing, or subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a quiet journey to reach 1,000 subscribers, not for numbers, but because each one of you makes it possible for me to continue creating these reflections. Not rushed, not loud, but rooted. Thank you for being here.